For more on the future of the Iran nuclear deal, let's turn to our panel. Joining us from London is Ian Black. He's a visiting senior fellow with the Middle East Centre at the London School of Economics. Here with us in the studio is Negar Mortazavi. She is a Washington correspondent for Iran International. And Boaz Bismuth is the editor-in-chief of the newspaper Israel Hayom. He joins us from Tel Aviv. Let's start in Tel Aviv, Boaz, but I want to play a little bit more of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's talking about Iran. Let's take a listen.
Iran lied. Big time. After signing the nuclear deal in 2015, Iran intensified its efforts to hide its secret nuclear file. In 2017, Iran moved its nuclear weapons files to a highly secret location in Tehran.
Now, Boaz, a lot of skepticism about this announcement of getting all these secret files. The IAEA have said this is nothing new. Even a lot of Israel's supporters in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere have said the timing is very suspicious. What's your reaction?
Well, first of all, probably we didn't speak to the same supporters in the States, because on the contrary, what I have heard coming from the States and the Friends of Israel all over the world is that, I mean, first of all, very impressive. I mean, how would I say? I mean, the capacity of Israel to obtain this information, which this is already something which is tremendous. Now, you might say that there is nothing new. For me, when you say that, I might even agree with you, because maybe some of the data is not new, but the scope is impressive, you will admit. But what is not new is that Iran is lying. I mean, every time, I mean, for years, Israel is saying that Iran is lying concerning its nuclear program, not lying concerning its aspiration in the region, and what's its, what would I say? I mean, what they would like Israel to be, in fact, nothing, to disappear. So, for me, what Prime Minister Netanyahu did this week was really important, because it was to share with the world the information that Iran, all the nuclear program of Iran is not a civil program. Otherwise, you don't need to do it underground. It's a military one. And concerning the world, as a journalist, I mean, who covered the negotiations that took place in Switzerland, in Turkey, what surprised me when in those negotiations between Iran and the five powers was the fact that some of the powers, especially the European ones, that is what disappointed me a lot, were so keen to have an agreement as much as Iran.
OK, I want to get Negar's reaction, but first of all, I'm going to read a tweet from the Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif. He turned to Twitter after this talk and said, "Breaking, the boy who can't stop crying wolf is at it again, undeterred by the cartoon fiasco at UNGA, that's the United Nations General Assembly. You can only fool some of the people some of the time." Zarif was referring to that sort of cartoon bomb that he held up in front of the General Assembly in 2012. This is really dismissive from the Iranians, but we've also seen it from the Europeans, even the French, who share some of the US's concerns about Iranian behavior beyond the nuclear deal.
I think we need to divide the concerns for Iran's nuclear ambitions and lack of transparency into two, I would say, portions. Before the JCPOA was signed, and then after the JCPOA, with the rigorous monitoring and inspections. What the Europeans are saying, let's not look at what the Iranians are saying. What the Europeans are saying, what the IAEA, the International Agency for Monitoring Iran, is saying, is that there's a mechanism. If you see any kind of discrepancy with Iran's commitments or lack of transparency, there's a mechanism to submit that to the IAEA. The IAEA has access to Iranian sites on the ground, and they have been confirming that Iran has complied to its end of the agreement, to its commitments. And quite frankly, the U.S. State Department, the current Secretary of State, also has confirmed that Iran has been committed to their end of the JCPOA and the nuclear deal. And I think the reason, maybe your other guest mentioned, the Europeans were very keen on signing the nuclear deal. The reason is because of the fact that the program wasn't transparent. And I think not just the European, but the international community had a feeling that this kind of monitoring and inspection should be imposed in Iran. They made Iranians come to the table and agree to these terms. And it seems that it has been a solid deal and working so far. So there's the question of why break something if you don't have a better alternative for it.
Ian, picking up on Negar's point, Mike Pompeo did say in his confirmation hearing that he thought Iran was complying with the JCPOA. And then days later, he was in Israel with Benjamin Netanyahu, and then the Israeli Prime Minister comes out with this sort of Iran lied thing. What's going on here? Is there some sort of coordination, do you think, between Washington and Israel in the lead up to the May 12th deadline to put out of the deal?
I think it's public knowledge that there's coordination. It's been reported in the Israeli media that the Israelis told President Trump about their findings, the latest intelligence trove, back in early March. I don't think there's any doubt about coordination. What there is doubt about still at this stage is exactly how President Trump is going to respond. He's given his deadline of May the 12th, just over a week's time, for the Europeans to come up with something else. There's a lot of speculation about what he'll actually do. He can announce that the US is withdrawing from the deal, but fail at this point to do anything practical, thus giving more time for the Europeans to come up with solutions to fix it or nix it. Netanyahu's very theatrical presentation the other day was designed to give political support to President Trump, but it isn't clear at this point, I think, exactly how the next stage is going to play out.
I'm glad you mentioned the next stage. Boaz, let's say Trump pulls out of the deal before or on May 12th. What's next? Cynics would argue that the US foreign policy team of John Bolton and Mike Pompeo and Donald Trump would then feel less restrained and have a more confrontational attitude towards Iran, along with Israel. Is that something you agree with?
First of all, I mean, it's not a secret. I mean, we know exactly what Mr. Bolton and also President Trump, when he was candidate Trump, what they thought of Iran and what they thought of the deal. So that's no surprise for all of us. I mean, when we think of Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump together, you know, before the presentation, which for me was a brilliant one, planning what to do. I remember perfectly well when Candidate Trump won the caucus in Nevada, February 2016. One of the first things he told me, the first question was that he's going to retreat from this deal. What next? I heard, I think it was Ms. Mortazavi speaking about no other better option. Now, we in Israel, we can't take a risk. When you speak about a nuclear country like Iran, which always says that for them, I mean, the destruction of Israel, I mean, is their aim. And by the way, every time when they've got military parade, you can see on their missile, death to Israel, which we'll never see in Israel, death to Iran. This is the big difference to both of us. So we cannot permit ourselves to say, is this the best option or not? What next? I'll tell you what next. Next is a deal, if you want to have a deal, is a deal in which, yes, your inspectors can go also to the bases, to military bases. What is a good deal? A good deal is where you can inspect also the missiles when this is not being taken off. What is a good deal? A good deal is also a deal that is not in time, meaning 10 to 15 years, and then Iranians can do whatever they want, because this is not a normal regime.
As Israel has nuclear weapons, right? What's going on there? I mean, if the Iranians are developing, they have their own nuclear arsenal.
So very good question, very good question. Did you ever, by the way, I will answer you. If it is true, by the way, did you ever hear Israel speaking about the destruction of Iran? Tell me, remind me, maybe you heard, I did not. But did you hear Iranians demonstration calling for the destruction of Israel? So how can you compare? How can you compare a country, a regime, a terrorist regime with a country like Israel? I mean, how can you compare? I mean, how can you even ask such a question?
Well, I mean, nuclear weapons are obviously a big threat in the region, and it's not exactly stabilizing to have a secret nuclear weapons program when you're criticizing another country.
By the way, France. Yeah, but France, for example, has also nuclear power, and you will never ask them because you know that they're a democratic regime, and you know that it's a country that you can trust, and they will not make use out of it. And if we speak about Israel, for example, in 1973, during the Yom Kippur War, you know, when the countries started the war against Israel, and the first days were really, really terrible. And if Israel has nuclear weapon, did it use it? Did Israel is threatening its neighbors? So let's not compare what is uncomparable.
I think it's worth bringing up, though. Negar, what do you think Iran does?
Well, I think the way we need to look at all of these issues, I was concerned that there's two sides to every issue. The threat from Iran to Israel has another side. Iranians feel a legitimate threat. It might not be as propaganda. There's no endorsement for the Iranian propaganda against Israel, but there is a legitimate threat that the Iranians feel. There's a fear that they feel. There's no friendship really between these two countries. And then coming also to the deal, a deal is a two-sided thing. It's an agreement. There's give and take. The the way this deal worked out, not just with the United States and the previous administration that President Trump is so hard trying to criticize, but also with all of America's allies and with Russia and China, was that they brought Iranians to the table, there was give and take, there were concessions, and then they were able to make a deal. If there is going to be another deal with more concessions taken from the Iranians, that means the United States and its partners should have to put more on the table. It just doesn't seem like that's what the Trump administration is going after. They just want to take more without giving Iranians any more, and that's basically not the way you make a deal or even negotiate.
The clock is ticking, 10 days and counting. We will leave that subject there. Thanks, Negar Mortazavi, and the rest of you stay with us. Up next, we'll discuss demonstrations in Gaza and calls for reviving of the talks between Israelis and the Palestinians. Stay with us. You're watching The Heat.